Very glad to be here to launch this book in Cork. It's funny, we were driving down, myself and Dan, and I was asking you about the title, where it came from, Without Power, Glory, and being very literary and posh, he kind of referred to Graham Greene's book, Power and Glory, wasn't it? So, like, being two tweeters and mobile phone addicts, I was straight onto my phone. And Graham Greene wrote that book in, I think it was in Mexico, 1938. He fled to Mexico because it was the only country which wouldn't have an extradition agreement, because he was in flight from a US publisher who wants to sue him for libel for a review he did of a Shirley Temple movie called Wee Willie Winkle. Life is strange. Strange. I think the American title was Labyrinth and Wages, I think. Labyrinth. I thought that might have been a good title as well for our time in government. I wanted to concentrate on that power word. Whatever about glory, I don't think we don't have to think about that for a while. But I want to just reflect maybe just a couple of thoughts, my own thoughts on power, political power in government. And I think there's a very green perspective on power and political power. I think there's a very green instinct with regard to power. And it's not to grab power. I remember, I'm sure there's people who've been involved in this Green Party for 20, 30 years. And I remember 20, 30 years ago, at meetings where you were in a pub somewhere and someone went, "Who's going to run for office?" No, me. I couldn't run. No, you run, I won't run. And that was in the ethos. I remember meeting one of the heads of the German Greens, Renate Künast, very bright mayor or leading Green politician in Berlin. And she was saying that their power structures, where they have 4 leaders, and she said it's very difficult to use the natural example. She said it's like you have 2 gooses out at the front of the flying formation, and how does the flock know where to go when there's 2 geese going in different directions? So I think there's something in the Green philosophy that actually, though, is appropriate in that sense of being slightly wary about power. I think there's something in an evolving networked world that we live in that actually a sharing of power is what is most effective. I think there's actually a change happening because a whole range of different reasons, the internet, a globalized society, communication system changing, that actually network power and shared power is going to be more effective or more powerful than some of the old hierarchical models that we followed. And I think green ecological thinking, which is all about networks and living systems, gets some of that. I remember the first time when we referred to the book when we were negotiating for a programme for government, Dan Boyle said one thing that really struck me. It was in regard to, we were talking about local government reform and restoring power to changing the Irish political system, which isn't working, which needs power to be restored to a local level. And it was a simple line he said that just really caught my attention as we came out or went into one of the negotiation sessions. He said, "Remember, we go into power to seek to give it up. We go into power in central government to seek to return it away from central government." It's one of the central motivations, one of the real fundamental changes we sought to try and introduce. And then we were in government at a time of real crisis, real financial crisis that was coming one way or the other. And history will have to say in terms of how we managed it and in terms of how that worked. My sense, one of the things I'd slightly change, you can pick up the book as a good reflection of the various developments over those last 3 or 4 years. One of my senses maybe of what I would slightly change or that I would do differently is I think we were constantly saying to the Irish people, we're in here to get green things done. Which we were, and which we had the real power to do. I had a strong sense coming out, maybe because I was lucky in the ministry I had, huge opportunities to change systems, to change the way the Irish economy works, Irish society works. But I think we use those words, we're here to get green things done, because it was difficult coming into power with Fianna Fáil, who had been in power for too long. You all knew that. And so somewhat in dealing with that, we said, we're in power to get green things done. And I think there was a sense then that people maybe slightly felt, well, they're in power to get green things done, but they're acquiescing with all these financial things that they don't agree with. but they're doing it because they want to get some other green things done that I don't really have as much concern about, because I'm really concerned about emigration, unemployment, hardship that's coming with the financial crisis. I think it comes out in the book that actually the real truth in that time was we were actually quite close in trying to understand this financial crisis and trying to manage it and trying to get as close to it as we could to do the best and the right thing by the Irish people. Dan, myself and others. And I'd have to say, and maybe this is people with different perspectives, and there's different angles, and we talked about this on the way down, we talked about it for the last few weeks. I want to give one or two perspectives from my perspective. And it is this, firstly, that actually I didn't think that there was anyone else in the Dáil who had as good an understanding of the nature of the financial crisis as I thought Brian Lenihan had. He was a smart guy. He had failings. We all have failings. He made mistakes. We all make mistakes. But he was quite green when you're going to him saying, listen, we've got to change the tax system towards site value tax. That's more clever. He would consider it. Our other options, where he had that open mind that actually could see that the green way was the way of the future. But not just Brian Lenihan. My sense, in the team of people that were around him that were managing that crisis. Paul Gallagher, the Attorney General. John Corrigan, the head of the NTMA. Kevin Cardiff, Secretary General in Finance. Frank Daly in NAMA and Brendan McDonough. Patrick Honohan, the Governor of the Central Bank, and Matthew Elderfield in the regulator. They were the people we were dealing with. And I'll be honest, my experience working fairly closely with those right through the crisis was that they were straight people, was that they were reasonably well qualified people, and that they were doing the best in the national interest. I heard Alan Ahern, I should have added to that list. It was Brian Lenihan's financial advisor, economic advisor. I heard him on the radio this morning say there had been a mistake made in November 2010 when the European institutions didn't actually treat the bank debt as a separate debt to the state. And he was right when he said yesterday, yeah, that was a mistake. A mistake, I think, largely from the ECB, because we were in there saying to do the change that he was suggesting. And that shows sometimes power in national politics. One of the natures of power in this present time is that it is global. It was, as Morgan Kelly referred to in his article, a phone call to Timothy Geithner saying, sorry, you can't do that, because there's a danger the whole financial system's about to collapse. And that's still happening. Like, that's still what happened in Spain the other day. It's the same thinking, it's the same sense that don't let it go because this system could all go completely. And I think, I just wanted to give my sense of those people at that time, because I hope in some way it gives a sense that actually, you know, there aren't easy solutions. I wish the new government well in their managing of it. They've taken the exact same approach, even though they said the exact opposite when they were in opposition. But it's not as if we had in the centre, in my mind, of the administrative system at the time, people who were deeply flawed, corrupt, or incompetent. I found that while they made mistakes and we made mistakes, they were actually people that I was proud to work with in that very difficult time. There was a quote on power that I read the other day, just by accident, and I want to refer to it. It was a quote from Aung San Suu Kyi, the Burmese leader. And it said, "It is not power that corrupts, but fear. Fear of losing power corrupts those who yield it, and fear of the scourge of power corrupts those who suffer under it." I particularly like that first line, the one about it's the fear of losing power that corrupts those who yield it. I think actually my experience, the other experience I have of people that I was working with in the middle of this crisis was of my 8 parliamentary colleagues. Because I think we still, none of us come from a political background. Dan was probably as close as anyone with your dad and his proud record involved in community. But none of us had any expectation of being in office or being in the Dáil even. And we still maintained, I think, that certain sense that we were there yielding power by certain accident in a way, or not by dint of long expectation. And my experience in that time, and the book is very good in terms of the last 6 months or the year of our time in office, highly controversial, highly contentious, highly difficult, was that the working relationship with those 8 other people was also something that I'm proud of. because we actually approached it, I think, in a green way. It was actually not a hierarchical approach, but a team approach, where we talked to each other, listened to each other, reflected on what we thought was the best thing in the national interest. And that was a bloody difficult question to answer on many occasions. And in the end, I think we had a clear sense we're not going to hold on to our seats here, but that's not the first most important thing. Whatever happens, let's just try and manage this to get the country through the most difficult, probably, moments in the history of the state since it was founded. And as I said, my experience, and I think the outcome of that at the very end, was that actually we concluded it by deciding collectively our approach. And history will tell whether the right approach is taken, the details one or the other. We could change aspects one or the other. But I actually think the way that those decisions were made, the approach that was taken collectively, was the right one. And that's why I'm proud to be here with Dan, helping to launch his book. As I said, there'll be different views, different senses of various aspects of it. But I think the fact that we're united in that sense, that we got it right, and this isn't a public thing, this I suppose is more, it's not of any great currency in any way, one or the other. But one thing it gives me a certain sense is of the importance of us actually getting a Green Party to recover, of actually maintaining some of that ethos, or ethics and ethos in Irish politics is something that is right and good. And that's also what we're about in this difficult time. It'll take time, but I think something like those sort of values and that sort of approach to power is needed in Irish politics, and that's what we still, I think, have a role in trying to do. Thank you and well done, Dan.